friends, and welcome back to Dish It with Des. I am Desiree, your podcast host. Today we are going to be talking about Real Housewives of New Jersey, the latest episode called All Bets Are Off. Overall, I found this episode pretty boring, as I have found most of the episodes in the season so far. But this one starts off and we see Teresa in therapy, and then we have a charity baseball game, then Jen and Bill are in therapy, and honestly, I feel like I need therapy after this episode. So the issue I'm having with New Jersey right now is that it is the same fights from previous seasons just still happening. And I'm starting to feel like it's getting stagnant. I was super excited to hear that they were bringing in 2 new people, and I'm hoping that maybe eventually that's going to change it up for us a bit. But the narrative is still Teresa and Joe not getting along, and Jennifer and Teresa having some sort of grudge against Marg and talking about her constantly and trying to make her look bad. So I'm just starting to feel like it's every issue from prior seasons and they just keep carrying over, and it's getting a little bit stagnant for me, to be honest. The episode starts out and Marg has a wrist surgery. She hurt her wrist in a previous episode and found out that she needed surgery. So she has that on her arm, like a big brace type thing. And Teresa is at a therapy appointment. Apparently, Louis has been the one to encourage her to go. Therapy was never something she thought she would want to do, but he likes therapy, so I guess he encouraged her to go, especially because she's saying that she does not like how she acted and reacted towards Margaret last season. So he encouraged her to go and figure out why she responds and reacts the way that she does, which I think that's a good thing. Honestly, Teresa needed therapy a long freaking time ago. She's always been toxic. She's always been mean, and it is her reactions and her delivery that just are too much. I always felt like it was for TV, but if she's actually going to therapy for this, maybe this truly is who she is as a person. I don't like Louis. I don't think he's good for her, but this is not a bad thing. So if he's the one that's encouraging her to go to therapy, then thank you, Louis, because Tree needs it. So you see her and her therapist talking about the boys' night and how that went down, and she said that it made her really uncomfortable, hearing that her brother was yelling at Louis, and also that Joe didn't go to her housewarming party, and apparently this is really affecting her. And I have stated my opinion on this before. I do not think that this is one person being wrong. I think that there's things that everybody has done that have probably not been okay, and I don't think it's okay to constantly pin the problem on the other person. I'm sure her therapist is going to make her be accountable for certain things. I didn't really see much of that in this episode. She was just talking about Joe and, everything that's going on and how that's affecting her. And she says that she's sad because this is the only family that she has, like Melissa and Joe and their kids, because their parents are gone. And I am going back to exactly what I said about the previous episode. If you are so sad about this, then why did you make a comment like you did at the housewarming saying that everybody who was at your housewarming is everybody you would want to be there? There's nobody, that wasn't there that you wouldn't want to be there, and that this is your chosen family. If it's bothering you that this is your family and you don't have a good relationship with them, then you don't say stuff like that. You would say, I wish my brother was here. I'm glad Melissa is here, but I really am missing my brother in this moment. Don't act like you're okay if you're not. Just say how you feel. And that's probably what the problem is all the time, because she doesn't really seem like she cares if Joe is in her life. She's not nice to him. She called him little bitch boy at the reunion last year. You don't say these things and then say oh, where's my family? Well, you can only push people so far until they don't want to be around you anymore. And I feel like that's where Joe and Melissa are now. They're just kind of over it and sick of it. And if you keep getting on the carousel and the hamster wheel, you're the crazy one, right? Then Teresa says something that I find so interesting, and I don't know if I remember hearing this information before. I feel like we probably heard this when her cousins were on the show. Do you remember back in the day, Kathy and Rosie being on the show, and she was so mad about it? But she states that she didn't grow up with her cousins because her dad wouldn't talk to them over $200. So that does give us a little bit of insight into like the family dynamic that she grew up in, and maybe why her and Joe are the way that they are, because that like toxicity has been passed down. So instead of resolving the issue with the family over $200, they didn't grow up with cousins. So she says that like this is why she doesn't want the cousins, the kids, to ever be affected by what's going on with the adults. But like I don't, I hear her saying this and I like what she's saying, but I feel like her actions don't support that, because now the narrative that she has always had, her kids are getting older and they have the same narrative. So I don't think she's doing enough to not pass that type of toxic behavior down to her kids. In the last episode, I said, my podcast episode, I said that when Antonia said that the cousins don't like to get involved. And I was like, I feel like I heard something recently, though, that Antonia didn't go to something of one of the cousins. Well, she says it. So apparently Antonia did not go to Melania's Sweet 16. I feel like I read this somewhere and it was just like, it was made out to seem like Antonia didn't go just because she didn't want to go, or because Joe and Melissa didn't want her to go or something. I feel like it was being worded that way. And the reason she didn't go was because she had a cheer competition. And Melania was apparently like really upset over this. But like, I don't have kids that are in cheer, but I know people who have children in cheer. And when you get serious into those cheer competitions, like it's all the time. You don't have much free time because they are constantly traveling and going all these places for these cheer competitions. So I just don't think that maybe that was something that Antonia could help. And at some point you have to like give somebody a little bit of grace. Maybe Melania needs to do more with her life and get involved in something so that she's not holding a grudge against her cousin for going to a cheer competition that was probably a mandatory thing instead of her Sweet 16. Or like, how about some communication? Why not plan the party when your family doesn't have something to do? And this is where I start to wonder, like, did she plan it then just because she knew that there was a cheer competition that Antonia wouldn't be able to come, and then she would be able to use that narrative to make Joe and Melissa look bad? Could be. She makes a statement to the therapist that her brother Joe's temper scares her. And the therapist is asking her if that's because her dad had similar reactions to things growing up. And she said yes, like her dad was definitely very tough and had a bit of a temper. But she seemed so close with her dad. So why would it be okay for her dad to have that type of personality but not her brother? And you can only help like so much. Like it is a lot of work to break toxic family habits. And if Joe's temper came from him growing up around somebody who had that type of temper his whole life, it's probably really hard for him to control it. So she's saying that she gets a little bit triggered because it reminds her of her dad's reactions. But she has the same type of reactions. She acts the same way. She has a horrible temper. We've seen her not only flip a table, but throw stuff at people and encourage people to pour drinks on other people's heads. Like, the one thing with Joe is I've only ever seen him get angry towards Teresa. I haven't really seen him like blow up on anybody else. I have seen him like obviously Joe, Judice, and Louie, but again, it's in association with his sister. I've never seen Joe act like that towards anybody else that's in the group or anybody else that's ever been on the show, where that is where Teresa puts all her anger on everybody else. At least Joe's anger is only on her and her family, and there's probably a lot that we don't know that isn't on the show. Who only knows like what really is going on and things that are said or whatever, but like this is where I have the issue with Teresa, because it's always Joe. How about your reactions? How about the way you treat people? And I am hoping for her that that's what she gets out of therapy is accountability, because she needs to be held accountable. The next two scenes kind of keep going like back and forth. So we're kind of seeing like Margaret at her house post her wrist surgery. Jen Fessler comes over to visit her. So we see them, and then we see Jennifer, Aiden, and Bill. And it just keeps going like back and forth between scenes. So Jen Fessler's at Marge's house, and they're talking about the baseball game coming up, Dolores' charity baseball game. And Jen says that nobody's going to want to see her run. And then she asks Margaret, like, are you going? And then cut over to Jennifer Aiden, and she's sitting outside with her husband Bill, and she tells him that she does not want him to be nice to Margaret anymore at this point. Which I mean, I get that, like, she wants her husband in her corner, but they don't really have that dynamic where he's ever in her corner. So I feel like her giving him this ultimatum is just like, I feel like Bill is just going to do what Bill wants to do regardless. And then Jen Fessler, shooting back over to Marge's house, tells Marge that Jennifer Aiden texted her and kind of like after the brunch thing and just said like that I guess it was her way of apologizing, but she just feels like she was pushed by Margaret to like act that way. And Jen is telling Bill that when she was at the brunch and Margaret was attacking her, that everybody was silent and just let Margaret attack her because everybody is afraid of Margaret. I don't know what I'm not seeing. Like, I've seen Margaret say some things that aren't nice. I think all of the housewives have kind of done that. So that's not really like out of the realm of what the show is about. But I feel like Margaret saying things that aren't nice are always because somebody is starting with her and that's how she handles it. And Jen just spews things to get a reaction out of people. So this is just not a good dynamic. I just don't think that they're good for each other because Jennifer is always going to try to piss Margaret off, and Margaret is always going to get pissed off and spew hateful things back. And this is where I said I'm getting bored with this because it's the same thing every season. And like, I like Margaret, but like, I'm still getting sick of seeing the same thing all the time. It's like, but Jennifer Aiden thinks that Margaret has dirt on everybody, and that's why everybody's afraid of her. I don't really believe that. Like, I've seen Margaret form some really good and genuine friendships with like Dolores and Jackie and Melissa. I don't see her like screwing them over for no reason at all. I don't see her like holding things over their head like, I know this about you. I just don't get that vibe from her. That 100% sounds a lot more like something Teresa and Jennifer would be doing. So I do think it's like a deflection tactic. Like, I'm innocent and this person's not. And for some reason, they always put it on Marge. Jen Fessler then asked Marge how she's going to handle seeing Jennifer Aiden at the baseball game. And Marge said she's just not going to acknowledge her. And the one thing I like about this scene, and this is where I'm starting to feel like I do really like Jen Fessler because she is very good friends with Margaret. And she is holding her accountable for like saying mean things to Jennifer Aiden. She's not just giving her a pass and saying like, well, yeah, she says hurtful stuff too. And, you know, so it was right for you to say it back. She pretty much tells her like, that wasn't you. That's not the Margaret I know. And she said like, you were mean. And I think it's good. She's like a breath of fresh air. And I just think it's good that even though Margaret is her really close friend, that she's not just giving her a pass, and she is kind of like being truthful with her and telling her like, maybe you effed up a little bit, or maybe you shouldn't react like that because she brings you out of character and that's not the person I know. Let's talk about my girl Dolores for a little bit. I love her. So she's at her house with her boyfriend Paul, and she just seems so happy, and she deserves the world. Like, when I tell you, I just think so highly of Dolores. I think she's such a good person. I think she's level-headed. I think that, you know, what I like about her is that she doesn't just side with whoever. She sides with whatever person is right in the moment. So you don't just see her like blindly defending people who don't deserve it. And I do feel like she's a very genuine person. Her kids seem like amazing people, and that's a huge testament to how they were raised. So that's like the one thing I see with like Teresa's kids. Like, honestly, I don't care for them. And with Dolores's kids, they just seem so sweet. And I really think that she probably was like the best mom growing up. And we know that her and Frank have like a rocky history. Frank cheated on her while she was pregnant and they weren't together anymore, but she always made sure that they had a good co-parenting relationship because that's what she wanted for her family. And I have a lot of respect for her for that, because I can't imagine being in her position and allowing Frank to be involved in her and the kids' life as much as she allowed. Dolores' dad comes over, and starting to see a dynamic between Dolores, Paul, and her dad. And it seems like Paul and her dad get along really well, which I love because Dolores is very close with her parents. So I feel like their approval probably means a lot to her. And the dynamic in this scene is her talking about how her priorities are not on Frank anymore. And Frank is having a hard time with this. We're definitely seeing Frank struggle with this a little bit. Paul is her number one now. And her dad says that Paul is good for her. So, Frank, I feel like he's used to being, no matter who she was dating, the only other person we saw her dating was David, who was never around. So I feel like we couldn't really gauge what their relationship was like. But we do know that Frank, Catania, and David got along really well. Like, even when Frank had a surgery, he stayed at David's house. It's so weird, but I guess he liked her with David better because David was never around, so he still got to be like the number one guy in her life. I'm the number one guy in this group. But now that she's with Paul, she wants to be respectful of what Paul's boundaries are. And this is going to be, I think, hard for Frank to get used to, the dynamic, because I don't think she's wrong. I think that she definitely put Frank first for a long time. And at this point in her life, it's time for Dolores to come first. And if that means having a more private relationship with Paul, not letting like Frank be around all the time, I think that's 100% healthy. And I think it's what she needs. I guess some of the other cast members wanted to see how their game was. Since there is this charity baseball game coming up, we see Rachel and Melissa and both of their hubbies, and then Frank, Catania, and his girlfriend at batting cages. So in this moment, we see Frank bring up Paul, and that he said he doesn't hear from Dolores as much anymore, and it's really affecting him, and that he loves her. And he said he's the furthest from her that he's been in years. I really like Frank Catania. I do. And it kind of sucks because we've always seen him and Dolores have this really great dynamic. And I think a lot of us were maybe pulling for them to get back together, but I completely understand if that is not something that she wants, because they have a rocky history and I'm sure there's a lot of hurt there. And maybe she just doesn't feel like that about him anymore, right? And that's okay. Like, she doesn't, just because she has a good relationship with him as the father of her children does not mean she has to get back with him. But I do feel like a lot of people were pulling for that. So it's kind of hard to see Frank struggling with this. And I am interested to see if this gets better over time. Like, if Paul will allow Frank to be around more, or if Frank is just going to have to get used to this new dynamic between him and Dolores. He also says that he thinks Paul's insecure. So we see them asking Frank's girlfriend how she's felt about the dynamics between like Frank and Dolores in the past or whatever. And she says that in the beginning, she definitely thought it was a little bit weird, but she said she got used to it quickly. And once you got to know their dynamic and know them, she realized that there was nothing to be worried about, like, between them. But Frank making this comment that he thinks maybe that Paul's a little bit insecure with him being around. I don't think that that's what it is. And I don't think Paul's going to like hearing that. Then you see Joe Gorga up to bat, right? And Melissa throws like a little jokey joke in about a ball player. Like, I wonder if I dated a ball player, if he would bat better than that or something. And Frank says that he wants to hear more about whatever it is that she's talking about. So she brings it up, how Jennifer Aiden is taking that comment that Margaret made out of context. And I agree with Melissa on her next statement. She said she has a plan for her revenge tour on Marg. I agree. I feel like Teresa and Jennifer, I said it my last podcast episode, that they're on a smear campaign. Like, Teresa is still gung-ho. And even though she says she's moved on, no one believes her. She is still like pissed because she thinks that Margaret was bringing some of these things about Louis like to light or like to the press or whatever. Louis doesn't like the stuff that has come up about him. I don't think that we needed Margaret to bring that to our attention. The thing was like a lot of us had already seen and heard about stuff well before that last season aired. And of course, with Margaret bringing up Jennifer's affair, they are not going to let up on this. And I really don't want to hear about it anymore. I'm so sick of them. So next we see Rachel telling them about the birthday party that Danielle had for her daughter. And at the end of that, we saw Teresa and Jennifer Aiden talking to the two new girls. And she lets the group at the batting cages know that she got a warning conversation. And Melissa says that she knows fake when she sees it, because she's bringing up how Teresa wanted to invite Margaret over her house and kind of like put everything behind them. And Melissa said she 100% knew that that was not genuine. And it's clearly not, because Teresa seemed like she wanted to make up with Marg, but then here we are and she's still doing the same thing. So it's like, my thing is like, you don't have to forgive anybody. You don't have to make up with anybody if you don't freaking want to. In the confessional with Melissa, she says that she sees Louis for who he is. And she said Louis can be very charming, but he's also very manipulating. So she thinks that he kind of swayed Teresa to make up with Margaret, almost like, well, and Teresa, I feel like, has said this, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. That's kind of her motto. So if he pushed her to make up with Margaret in hopes that Margaret would stop telling what Melissa says is the truth, but stop talking about Louis and whatever's going on, I do believe that. I do think that Louis probably said, you need to make up with her because, like, there's a lot of shit about me that I don't want out. And if you are on her good side, she's not going to bring it up. I 100% could see that being the truth. And Melissa says flat out, Teresa hates her, she hates Joe, she hates Marg, and that's what it is. And she didn't say these exact words, but pretty much like that she doesn't really want to engage anymore. And I don't blame her. I mean, it's just, at this point, like, what is the point? Because we've seen them make up so many times in the past, and it's like, things seem good. And honestly, like, I don't know if Teresa thinks that this type of drama is better for the show, but it is much more entertaining to watch when Melissa and Joe and Teresa are getting along than it is when they're not. Honestly, seeing them not get along gives me a lot of anxiety. So I like it better when they do get along, and I don't really understand why this is still going on. And if you can't figure it out and move on genuinely and get along, then you just need to cut ties. And I feel like that's kind of where Melissa is starting to head, because she probably just can't take it anymore. Melissa makes another statement that she feels like Jennifer and Teresa are just trying to ice Marg out. And it does seem like that is what's going on, because we've seen Margaret and Jennifer sit down and have a conversation, and it seems like they made up. We've seen the same thing happen with Teresa, and here's Margaret, like, probably thinking everything's fine, because I do feel like when Margaret says she's going to make up with somebody or have a conversation, forgive them and move on, I think she means it, but the other two definitely don't. So then it's just the same thing. So let's get into Dolores' charity event, because like I said, this episode makes me feel like I need some therapy after watching it. And the charity event was like the highlight of the show. I like seeing anything to do with Dolores because I'm a big fan of hers, but also it's positive. And I like that she does this baseball game. It seems like something she's going to do every year. And she raises money, and it's nice to see a little bit of good mixed in with the drama. Also, I loved seeing that, because she said that I think they raised $180,000 at the last charity event, and she wanted to beat that. And she said her tactic for doing that was to have the men's sexy calendar at the baseball game for sale. And I'm telling you, that calendar is definitely what got them more money donated towards the charity this year, because that calendar was great. If you watched the episode where they were like shooting it and stuff, Frank Catania, I cannot handle. He's like an Easter bunny. It was amazing. And if I was there, I would have bought the calendar. Not gonna lie. So we see Danielle talking to Margaret and in the locker room thing, and she's asking her how she feels about this day and how things are gonna go following Jen Fessler's house. And Margaret says that she's gonna be fine because she's not arguing. Now, here's where I'm still getting to know Danielle. And it's hard because I'm not a fan of Jennifer or Teresa, and it's obvious that Danielle is a little bit closer with them. So that's why I'm struggling with her a little bit, because I don't, I just don't like anyone who's ever associated with them, because I think that they're just annoying and manipulative and never take accountability. So I'm kind of like cringing seeing that she's leaning towards them. But in her confessional, she's saying that she doesn't agree with this baseball player comment that Marg made. She doesn't think, she goes, if you wanted to compliment me, you could just tell me like my boobs look nice. But if you're insinuating that like I could get another guy or whatever, that means that you don't think that my marriage is like right for me or whatever. And I didn't get, I don't know, maybe you guys feel differently about it. I didn't like get that vibe from the comment. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm biased because I'm more of a fan of Margaret and Melissa. I don't know. But like, I definitely, until she made that statement, I didn't think of it like that. And then she's like, I'm close with Teresa and I like Jennifer and I have to like kind of trust what they're telling me. And so I don't know how I feel about Margaret yet. And this is where like I don't know how I'm going to like Danielle, because I like Rachel Fuda's mindset on the whole thing more than Danielle's, where Rachel's like, I'm just going to get to know everybody and make my own opinion. Danielle is pretty much telling us in this moment that she is kind of allowing Teresa and Jennifer to sway her opinion, or just make her more cautious and standoffish of Marge because of the things she's heard. Where, I mean, she's not, like, I get that if that's how she feels and she wants to try to like protect her peace, like Teresa always says, but I think it would be better for her to form her own opinion and not let outsiders influence her opinion. It's one thing to be like, I'm going to be a little bit cautious because I'm not sure yet. But when she said, like, I kind of have to trust, like, my other friends, and I have to think that there might be some truth behind that, there's not a lot of truth behind anything they do. So then Margaret says that she thinks her and Teresa are fine unless she's bitching about something that Margaret is not aware of. So Danielle brings up the comments from the other day from the party. And that's where I'm like, where do I stand with you, Danielle? Because if you're more on Teresa and Jennifer's side, then why are you bringing it up? And why are you telling Margaret that there was like a conversation that they had about her? And she's definitely like making it clear that she has the reservations about where she'll stand with Margaret. So then Teresa arrives and Joe says that he kind of just wants to like keep his distance because he doesn't want to deal with the fighting and the drama. But we do see him say hello. Like Melissa's kind of showing Teresa the boys' sexy calendar thing, and he does walk over and he says hello, and you see him being cordial, but you see him keeping his distance a little bit. So I agree with what he's doing. I mean, he said hello, he was polite, but he's not like overly engaging because that would probably be fake. So this baseball game always seems like so much fun, and it's for charity, so I love that. I think that it's just a really good cause, and Dolores always seems really proud of it. So a lot of this episode was just a baseball game going on, so not much happening. One moment that really did stand out to me, though, was Rachel talking to Jennifer Aiden and kind of telling her about how she was talking to Olivia at that birthday party, and she made a comment that broke her heart a little bit, that like Jennifer has said in the past and has said it on this episode, that Olivia wanted to like be on a stage and be like on Broadway, that type of thing. And apparently now Olivia says she wants to be a therapist and she wants to help people like love each other. And Jennifer says that this is why she never wanted the affair to be talked about, and this is why she never wanted her kids to find out about it, because it was going to affect how they thought about their dad, their feelings towards their dad. So I can empathize with her in that aspect just because I'm a mom, and when things start to affect your kids, it's very heartbreaking. So, in that case, I feel bad. And I remember in the previous episode watching that moment, and it was a little bit sad to see her say that, because it's obvious that she's aware of what's going on with her parents, and she is probably thinking like that she wants to fix it. And that's why her career mindset has changed. Like she wants to fix her parents, and that's her way of probably coping. And then we see this little sad moment with Frank. He tells Dolores that he misses their relationship and that he cried the other day. And in this moment, he kind of looks sad. Like he looks like he has tears in his eyes. And like, I love that Dolores is happy. And I I really like Paul. Like, she truly looks like she's in the happiest moment of her life. But I do hope that her and Frank can figure this out, because Frank is not, like, he did cheat on her, but for some reason I have a soft spot for him, and I don't know why. I can't tell what it is about Frank and Tanya that I like, but I do have a soft spot for him. So seeing him getting a little bit choked up makes me sad. So, and Dolores, it cuts right to her in a confessional, and she says that he cannot make her feel guilty about a relationship that she deserves. And I love Dolores for this, because she 100% knows like what she deserves. I do feel like she gave David a pass for too long. I think she tried a little bit longer in that relationship than she should have. But at least she didn't just say it, right? Like, she did realize eventually that it was not for her. And I think at this point in her life, she knows what she deserves, and she's not going to settle for anything less than that. And I want her and Frank to be okay. The charity event went great. They raised over $200,000. So it was more than last year. And I'm telling you, it's because of that sexy photo shoot that she had all the guys do for this calendar. I guarantee you that extra money came from those calendar sales for sure. So are we ready to need therapy again? Because we end the episode with seeing Bill and Jennifer in therapy. Honestly, this was the most boring part of the show, this episode. Just seeing them in therapy was like torture. So they go, and Jennifer says how Bill was always against therapy, and he just like didn't think it was necessary, I guess. But the way she kind of swayed him to realize that maybe this is something they needed to do, she brought up the thing about their daughter Olivia and how she wants to be a therapist. So I guess he realizes that some things are starting to affect the kids, and maybe he's more open to it now. But like, he barely says 2 words in this therapy session. So I don't know. Bill's gonna have to like let that wall down if he wants therapy to even work, because he doesn't, even though he agreed to go, he still doesn't seem like he wants to be there. Of course, the topic of this therapy session is the affair, and the therapist asks like how the kids found out about the affair, and she says that, Jennifer says that Olivia apparently saw it on a TikTok, some sort of like headline, I guess, and that's how she found out about it. And Jennifer admits that she has some anger there, which I think that's probably normal, right? And Bill's thoughts about it is that the kids view their mom as being perfect, and because she's like fun and kind of lets them do whatever they want, and whatever, and he's more of like the structured one that like lays down the law a little bit more. And he said that he feels like it was already kind of hard to parent them, because he wants them to have like a more strict life, and she just lets them do whatever they want. But he said that once they found out about the affair, he feels like that made it even worse, that like Jennifer is perfect and he's not. And he said it's just a really hard dynamic right now. Jennifer also said something else that's extremely alarming. She said that Bill comes home from work and she can see that he like pulls up, I guess, like in the driveway on the camera, and then he goes into the pool house for 3 hours, and that he doesn't come into the house until they're like, the whole family's like done with dinner and everything. I am sorry. That is not okay. I don't know what they're doing together. I really don't, because it's not even about how he feels about her. If he doesn't want to come home from work and spend time with his kids, like he can't even sit down and have dinner with them, I would never in my life want to stay with somebody who is like that. I think that that's weird. If he's sitting in a pool house for 3 hours, he doesn't even want to be there. That's it. He does not want to be there if that's what he's doing. Like, he doesn't want to walk into that house. And I literally, I feel like anxiety right now, like thinking about that type of dynamic. And what do your kids think? That you don't even want to sit down at the dinner table with them. I don't know. I don't like this at all. And I'm not saying that like I want anyone's marriage to split up, but you do have to weigh like, is this healthy? Like, would this be less stressful and toxic if like we weren't around each other? I don't know. Oh, and speaking of that, In my previous episode, I stated that I saw somewhere that they separated. I was trying to like Google that last night. Now I know I saw this headline like on Facebook or somewhere. And when I tried to Google it last night, I couldn't find anything about it. So like now I'm like annoyed because I know I read this somewhere and now I can't find anything about that, which is weird. But like I really feel like I saw that recently. I'm hoping I didn't have like a dream about it. So if you guys have seen an article anywhere saying that Jennifer and Bill have separated, can you please send it to me? Because I feel a little bit crazy myself that I know that I saw this somewhere and now I can't find this information anywhere. So what I'm noticing in this therapy session is like Bill barely says anything. Even the therapist says like Bill is silent, and Jennifer like kind of goes off and said he's always silent. This is how he always is. And I'm sure that is frustrating. And I don't even like Jennifer, but I do kind of feel bad for her in this moment because we see her trying and I feel like we do not see Bill trying. I just don't think I think he's mentally checked out already. So I really thought they were separated. Jennifer said that she just needs Bill to be there more and he just looks miserable. So that's how this ended in this awkward therapy session that I feel a little bit yucky even watching them in therapy. I don't know. Seeing Teresa in therapy on the show was like fine. But for some reason, when it comes to Jennifer and Bill, like I just feel like that shouldn't be on TV because she's like complaining that like this information about the affair got put out there. But like since the information came out, this is all she's talked about. And like she could have just put it to rest. Like she could have just been like, you know what? We're not talking about this. This is in the past. And like we've moved on from that. Even if they didn't, like even if they needed to work on it a little bit, she could have just shut it down. But now she's continuing the conversation. So she's worried about like her kids finding out, but now like this is all we're hearing about. So like to protect your kids, you would think that you would keep this off the show. And I know they're supposed to show their lives, but I do know that there's a boundary there because there's other housewives that like we don't really know that much about their personal lives. So I just don't like that she was complaining that it's been brought to light and then she's continuing to bring it to light. And this whole season, like you figure that was last season, now we're hearing about it the entirety of this season. So I think she needs to start to look at some of the stuff that she's putting on the television and how that's going to affect her kids. This therapy session should have been private. I'm thinking that maybe if cameras weren't around, Bill may have opened up more. Maybe. I don't know. But I'm hopeful to think that way. So that was it for this episode. Not an exciting episode. Kind of sick of hearing about the same old stuff. Really looking forward to the next Vanderpump Rules episode because that has a lot more going on right now than this does. But either way, thank you for joining me. I'm sorry if this wasn't super exciting. I can only do so much. I can only, deliver to you what is delivered to me from the episode. Feel free to comment. I will always post everything onto my Facebook page. Anytime I make a new episode, I will make a Facebook post. And if you guys want to talk about it, I would love for you to comment on that Facebook post because then we could have like a little bit of a chat like back and forth and create like a little Bravo community. That's what I would love. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.